Joe,
I think
how's it going? Hi, it's so nice to see you.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming on. It is with great joy that I welcome you back post a Biden victory. The last time we spoke was a pre-Biden victory. And just for anyone who's just joining us, Joe Cirincione is a national security analyst and an author with over 35 years of experience working on issues like this. We're talking about national security in D.C. He is a distinguished fellow with the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft there in D.C. Thanks, Joe, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Sure. It's my pleasure.
The last time you were here, we were all terrified because the question was, what happens? What can Donald Trump do that might make him a national security threat if he loses his office, has his Donald Trumpian tantrums, and still has the power of the office, through January? And now here we are. Can you talk about what we're seeing and what, if anything, is concerning to you?
Well, I was watching Morning Joe this morning, and they talk about this as a coup, that Donald Trump is trying to do a coup at this point. So he's way past the point of having a real legal path to victory. And now he's actually blatantly, openly, according to his tweets and all reports, trying to convince state legislatures to overturn the results of a legitimate democratic election. And so that is, in anybody's book, a coup. He's trying to use the instruments of state power to overthrow the will of the people. So that's what's going on here. A coup meter.
Got our coup meter.
You are way ahead of me. Well, I would personally, I would move that closer to the orange. I would move that closer to the attempted coup. I think we're definitely in coup territory. It's not an armed coup. It's not a third world, as we used to call it, a coup. But it's definitely trying to overturn the results of an election and stay in power by illegal extra parliamentary means. That's what he's doing. So what are the dangers of that? There's, do you want me to go into that?
Please, I beg of you.
There's three levels of danger. And one is the kinds of things that he can do sort of legally while he stays in power. And that is the kind of executive orders he could give, the kinds of arms deals he could make. For example, he's about to make a major shipment of arms to the United Arab Emirates so they can wage their bloody war in Yemen. There's things he can do to affect U.S.-Israel policy, for example. You see Mike Pompeo in the Middle East trying to do that, basically legitimize the illegal occupation of the West Bank and the settlements, et cetera, et cetera. So there's those kinds of things that you can do, and there's things that Congress or others can try to do to stop them. That's sort of in the normal range of things you have to worry about. It really gets troubling when you get to the second stage, which is military adventurism. The wag the dog scenario, where the leader tries to stage a military intervention, a war, a conflict, in order to rally the American public around him. And in this case, that may allow him to declare some emergency orders, including the famous Insurrection Act, that could allow him to have executive powers that he doesn't currently now possess and help him cling to power. This has come to the fore because of his complaint to his national security leaders that he wanted some options for attacking Iran. So we know this is real. It was just a week ago, 10 days ago, that he was in the Oval Office demanding options for attacking Iran. This could lead to a major war in the Middle East before he leaves office, either intentionally, that he intentionally launches it, or his provocations, his clumsiness. His foreign policy isn't much better than Rudy Giuliani's defense team. They could stumble into a war. And that is, and then it's quite possible, given the volatile nature of the Iranian regime, they're not a bunch of good guys there just wanting peace. They're contending with us in the Gulf. So I worry about that probably the most. That's the most likely scenario, stumbling into a war with Iran. And the third, and then I'll stop here, and we shouldn't forget this, and I don't mean to scare you or your listeners.
No, we want you to come on to scare us, because you scared us before, and we need to be educated about what might happen. It's important.
Well, the president of the United States has the sole unfettered authority to launch nuclear weapons whenever he wants, for whatever reason he wants. And once Donald Trump gives the order, no one can stop him. There's no conference required. There's no consultations. He doesn't need anybody else's approval. He has sole authority. and he has unfettered authority. No one can overrule him, including a general. A general can't say on the other end of the phone, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, technically they could, but then they'd be fired and replaced by someone.
They have to do this thing. What? I'm sorry. The signal's gone out. I'm sorry. What? Oh, these phones.
Al Franken jokes on his podcast, says now is the time not to give the president, not to take the nuclear codes away from him, but just give him the incorrect codes.
Right. Anything. Yes.
So that's the funny take on this. But, Donald Trump has this power. And I'm not saying that this is Hitler waiting to see if his orders to burn down Paris have been carried out, what a megalomaniac does when they know they're losing power. But he's on that spectrum. So you do have to worry about this. Is it likely? No, but it's not impossible. It's possible that he could do something totally beyond the bonds, unprecedented, never before, and completely crazy because, let's face it, this man is not mentally stable. So you do have to worry about this for the remaining 60 days or so, less now, 57 days that this man remains in power.
That is terrifying. Do you think that his doctors could sedate him? I mean, what can we do here? I have ideas. We can. Last week I heard there was talk that he wants to pull all of our troops out of Afghanistan and other areas and reverse decades of policy on the Israeli settlements. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So we have, folks, it's not actually that big a reduction. So this is a little exaggerated because we've been drawing down troops now for years. And during the Trump administration, we actually added troops to Iraq and Afghanistan. So we had a net gain there. But we're talking about thousands of troops. So in Afghanistan, for example, there were 4,500 U.S. troops down from almost 100,000 during the height of the war, over 100,000. And now he wants to take it down to 2,500 by Christmas. Well, some people are worried about that will curtail some operations that could lead to a close of one or two of the air bases there. And that's troublesome for some. I personally favor getting out of Afghanistan. I understand what will happen when we withdraw, but we can't stay. There is no victory plan for staying.
Talk about what will happen when we withdraw.
You could expect the Taliban to increase their military attacks. The sad truth is that after 19 years and tens of billions of dollars, we haven't stood up a stable government. We have a corrupt government in Afghanistan that does not enjoy the support of the people. And it's quite possible you could see a Vietnam type situation. That is, we pull our troops out, and the fragile government we left behind collapses to the armed opposition. Yes, you could see a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. I frankly don't see any way to avoid that without a massive new commitment of U.S. troops. I don't think the American public is ready to do that. So I do think we have to pull out. And in Iraq, the similar drawdown. I think by the time Joe Biden assumes office in January, there will still be a few thousand troops in each country. And I think there's an argument they do serve a stabilizing role at that low level for training, for conducting airstrikes. But we don't have to be there. My colleagues at the Quincy Institute feel more strongly than I do about this. Most of them are in favor of complete withdrawal, and they make a pretty good argument that you can conduct counterterrorism operations, for example, what we went into Afghanistan in the first place for almost 20 years ago. You can conduct those without actually having a ground presence in Afghanistan, and I think that's true.
So some of what we're hearing from mainstream media is really just hype and keeping people afraid, even though they have things to be afraid of, just maybe not that particular drawdown.
Yes, I agree. And the Vietnam experience is telling here. There was a lot of opposition to pulling out troops from Vietnam, but there was no winning path. There was nothing to be gained by staying. There was no victory plan. It was just a hang-on plan. At some point, you have to recognize that this was a disaster, this was a mistake, and no one else should die for it.
In terms of national security, what do you think Trump's last days in office and the 4 years before those last days will mean for Joe Biden and his ability to get the country back in some sort of order and both restore faith in our democratic institutions, but also restore some sort of stability on the international stage?
Yeah, I think there's three possibilities. One is that we see this kind of chaos that we're now talking about, and these kind of worst case scenarios continue to be in play all the way up to Inauguration Day. That's the second is that we go to the fetal ball position, which is kind of what you see Trump doing. Personally, we haven't seen him.
Fetal golf ball.
Yeah, just curl up into a fetal position. And he diminishes, and he just kind of like, that's possible. I mean, this manic depressive type of personality that he has, he could get very, very depressed and just curl up and just slink away. I think that's a little unlikely, but it's possible. And the third is that the Republican leaders do continue their slow, inexorable acceptance of the election results, and they have an intervention with Trump, and they sort of say, look, this is it. You've lost this, but look, you have a big role in the party to continue. Let's go out maximizing your future role, give up clinging to power, and we could end up having a more or less smooth transition. However, that's not going to happen soon. That's not going to happen this month. That might not happen till the end of December or so. And so every day, every week that you are not engaged in the smooth transition means that it's harder and harder for Joe Biden to pull the car out of the ditch, that he's not really going to be able to start serious work on pulling the car out of the ditch until noon on January 20th. And that, as he said last week, is going to cost American lives. It's going to cost American jobs. The country is paying the price for Trump's petulance.
Isn't that the truth? Can we talk specifically about how not turning it over until January affects the national security state?
Sure.
I know we've been kind of doing that, but I'm just trying to put those pieces together.
Yes, let me be very specific. So what that means is you do not have the formal department to transition team link up that you need in order to get the down brief from the departments that you're now taking over. So you can have a briefing book, you can have memos, but think of it like the turn of the shift at a hospital. I used to work at a hospital. I was a psychiatric counselor, which is what comes in quite handy when you're doing national security. I was a psychiatric counselor. And, when we would take over the shift, we would meet with the ongoing team, and we would have a half-hour, 45-minute turnover period. Where in addition to the nursing notes, we got the debrief on what was happening with the patients, what had to be done that day. Well, if you don't have that, you end up starting your shift with ignorance. You don't know the problems. You don't know what the team before you has been doing. You don't know what medications have been problematic in administrating. So the same is true for state, for the UN, for the intelligence agencies, for the Department of Defense. The longer you delay this, the less information is transmitted, the more problems may arise. And when you're talking about national security, these can get to be very, very serious problems.
And do you see on the horizon where other countries are poised and looking to take advantage of that gap?
People have said that. I don't see it. So it's a concern.
Like the rest of the world, like, can we get rid of this nut? Let's just go back to, they don't want to.
It's more like that.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, the idea that China is going to fill the gap or Russia is going to fill the gap, you see some of that, for example, in the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, where Russia's playing a role and we're just on the sidelines and haven't had any role in ending that conflict. You see some of that in Asia. But by and large, I think you're right. The other countries are looking for more stable U.S. leadership, and they do not want to cause a conflict between now and the beginning of the Biden administration, because they think they can do business with Joe Biden one way or the other. If you're Russia, you think you can, at least you'll have a known quantity that you're dealing with. And if the European allies, you can't wait for Joe Biden to get in. You can't wait for the alliance to be renewed, and you're breathing a huge sigh of relief.
As we all are. Joe Cirincione, National Security Analyst and author with over 35 years of experience. Check out one of his 7 books, including Nuclear Nightmares, Securing the World Before It's Too Late. I'm glad that title, you didn't change it, so it's not too late. That's good. Bomb Scare, The History and Future of Nuclear Weapons. He served previously as president of the Ploughshares Fund, a global security foundation, vice president for national security Security at the Center for American Progress and the Director for Nonproliferation at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Follow him on Twitter at Cirincione, Cirincione. Joe, have a nice Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for joining us.
Same to you. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You're watching ACT.TV. If you are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell your friends, because here we are. Joe Cirincione is one of my favorites. I don't want to insult the others. You have to always say they're one of your favorite guests when they might actually be your favorite. But you can't say that. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. If you're watching on Facebook, we'll be back. Well, we're not going to be here until after Thanksgiving, actually. We're not going to be here tomorrow, and we're not going to be here Wednesday due to COVID-related childcare issues. So just watch this interview 15 times, right? That's good enough. All right. I hope you all have a nice Thanksgiving, and I will see you next week.